The Adoption Answer. Who your real family is. 5 words that stopped Steve Harvey mid-sentence and transformed a game show studio into something sacred. 5 words that came from the mouth of an 8-year-old boy who had spent most of his life learning that family isn't about blood or genetics or who you look like in photographs. 5 words that would remind millions of viewers that the most important bonds aren't created by biology. They're chosen with intention, nurtured with love, and strengthened every day by people who decide to show up for each other no matter what. But this story doesn't begin with those 5 words. It begins 4 years earlier in a courthouse in Denver, Colorado, where a 4-year-old boy named Jake Williams sat on a wooden bench swinging his legs and clutching a stuffed dinosaur, waiting to meet the people who would become his forever family. Jake had been in foster care since he was 18 months old. His biological parents had struggled with addiction and mental illness, cycling in and out of treatment programs, making promises they couldn't keep, and missing visits they had sworn to attend. The state had finally terminated their parental rights after 3 years of failed attempts at reunification, 3 years of Jake being shuffled between temporary homes, 3 years of uncertainty about whether anyone would ever want to keep him forever. The Williams family, David, 34, a middle school teacher, Lisa, 32, a nurse, and their biological daughter, Emma, 6, had been Jake's foster family for 8 months when the adoption became final. They had taken him in as a temporary placement, expecting him to reunify with his birth family eventually. But as weeks turned to months, and Jake began calling them Mom and Dad, and Emma began introducing him as my real brother, the Williams family realized that temporary had become permanent in their hearts long before it became legal on paper. The adoption process had been complicated, expensive, and emotionally exhausting. Home studies, background checks, court hearings, social worker visits, therapy sessions, designed to help Jake process his early trauma. There had been moments when David and Lisa questioned whether they were equipped to handle the challenges that came with adopting an older child who had experienced neglect and multiple placements. But there had also been moments of pure magic. The first time Jake had called Lisa Mom instead of Miss Lisa. The morning he had crawled into their bed during a thunderstorm and fallen asleep between them. The day Emma had taught him to ride a bike in their driveway, both of them falling down laughing when he crashed into the bushes. The night Jake had whispered, "Are you going to keep me forever?" And David had answered, "Forever and always, buddy. Forever and always." The Family Feud audition had been Emma's idea. She had been watching the show with Jake one afternoon, and when Steve Harvey asked a family about their most treasured possession, Emma had turned to her little brother and said, "We should go on that show and tell everyone about our family." Jake had looked confused. "But we don't look the same. People might not think we're a real family." It was a conversation that broke David and Lisa's hearts because they recognized the source of Jake's insecurity. Despite 4 years of love and security, he still carried the fear that he didn't quite belong, that his differences might somehow make his place in their family less legitimate. "Jake," Lisa had said gently, "family isn't about looking the same. It's about loving the same. And we love you exactly as much as we love Emma. Exactly as much as we love each other." Emma had nodded seriously. "Jake, you're my real brother, because you're the one who shares my room and steals my Halloween candy and helps me with my math homework. That's what real brothers do." But Jake's question had stayed with all of them, and when the Family Feud acceptance call came 6 months later, David and Lisa saw it as an opportunity to give Jake something he desperately needed: public validation that their family, despite being built through adoption rather than birth, was as real and legitimate as any family on television. The Williams family had arrived at the Family Feud studios that Tuesday morning in October with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Jake, now 8, was the youngest contestant in Family Feud history to that point. But the producers had made an exception because of the family's compelling story and Jake's remarkable maturity. During the soundcheck and rehearsals, Jake had been quiet and observant, watching the other families, noticing how they interacted, how they looked alike, how they seemed to share inside jokes and family gestures, that came from years of shared genetics and experiences. The opposing family, the Johnsons from Atlanta, was a traditional nuclear family. Parents and three biological children, who all shared the same olive skin, dark hair, and easy laughter. They were warm and welcoming to the Williams family. But Jake couldn't help noticing how much they looked alike, how their mannerisms mirrored each other, how they seemed to communicate without words in a way that made him feel suddenly aware of his own differences. Jake was blonde and pale, where his family was brunette and olive-toned. His eyes were blue while theirs were brown. His temperament was quiet and thoughtful while Emma was outgoing and energetic. To anyone looking at photographs, it would be obvious that Jake didn't share DNA with the rest of his family. But to anyone watching them interact, it would be equally obvious that DNA was irrelevant to the bonds between them. When Steve Harvey introduced the Williams family during the opening segment, he had immediately been drawn to Jake, partly because of his age but mostly because of something indefinable in the boy's demeanor, a combination of wisdom and vulnerability that seemed unusual for someone so young. And here we have the Williams family from Denver, Colorado, Steve had announced. Now Jake, you're our youngest contestant ever. Tell me about your family, buddy. Jake had looked up at Steve with those serious blue eyes and said, "We're the kind of family that chooses each other. I'm adopted, but that just means my parents picked me special." The audience had let out a collective awe, but Steve had recognized something deeper in Jake's words. This wasn't just a cute kid saying something sweet for television. This was a child who had thought carefully about what family meant and had come to his own conclusions about where he belonged in the world. That's beautiful, Jake. And Emma, what's it like being a big sister? Emma had grinned. It's the best because I got to help pick my brother. Most people just get stuck with whatever brother they get. But we got to choose Jake because he's perfect for our family. The game had started with typical Family Feud energy. The Johnsons had taken an early lead, their natural chemistry and quick answers, making them formidable opponents. Steve was in his element, making jokes, reacting to unexpected responses, creating those moments of connection that made the show special. But during the fourth round, something shifted. The category was Name Something That Makes a Family Strong. It was the kind of heartwarming question that usually brought out predictable answers. Love, trust, communication, shared values. The Johnsons had just finished their turn with solid responses that had earned them decent points. It was Jake's turn at the podium. At 8 years old, he was small enough that he had to stand on a step stool to reach the microphone, but his presence filled the space in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. Throughout the game, Jake had been competent and engaged, but also somewhat reserved, as if he were still figuring out whether he truly belonged on that stage with his family. But now, facing this particular question, something in his posture changed. He wasn't just a contestant anymore. He was a child who had spent 4 years learning what made families strong, what held them together when biology wasn't the binding force, what made love last when it wasn't automatic or assumed. Jake, Steve said, for the points your family needs, name something that makes a family strong. Jake gripped the edges of the podium with his small hands and looked directly at Steve. When he spoke, his voice was clear and confident, carrying across the studio with the authority of someone who had lived this truth rather than just thought about it. Choosing to stay together when things get hard. The words hit the studio like a revelation. Steve's expression changed completely. He set down his cards and took a step closer to Jake, recognizing immediately that this wasn't just an 8-year-old giving a game show answer. This was a child speaking from experience, sharing wisdom that came from understanding what family meant when it had to be built rather than born. Jake, Steve said gently, that's not just a good answer. That's the answer. The board revealed that it wasn't there. The survey hadn't captured something so sophisticated, so emotionally mature. But everyone in the studio understood that Jake had given the most important answer possible, even if it didn't earn points on the board. Tell me about that, buddy, Steve said, abandoning his host role entirely. What do you mean when you say families stay together when things get hard? Jake looked back at his family, then at Steve, then directly into the camera, as if he were speaking to every child watching who might need to hear what he was about to say. When I was little, before my family adopted me, I lived in different houses with different people, and every time things got hard or I did something wrong or somebody got stressed, they would send me somewhere else, Jake said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of memories too heavy for someone his age. But my real family is different. When I have nightmares or when I get scared or when I mess up big time, they don't send me away. They stay with me and help me figure it out. The studio had gone completely silent. Steve Harvey, who had hosted thousands of episodes and heard every kind of family story, found himself struggling to maintain his composure. Jake, can I ask you something? Steve said. What makes them your real family? Without hesitation, Jake answered. They're the ones who chose me every day for 4 years. They're the ones who know that I like my sandwiches cut diagonally, and that I'm afraid of vacuum cleaners and that I have bad dreams sometimes about my first house. They're the ones who taught me how to ride a bike and how to tie my shoes and how to be brave when I'm scared. Steve looked over at David and Lisa, who were crying openly now, and at Emma, who was beaming with pride at her little brother. Jake, I need you to help me understand something, Steve said. Some people might say that your real family is the one you were born into. What would you say to those people? Jake considered this seriously, the way he considered all important questions. I would say that real family isn't about who you look like or where you came from. Real family is about who takes care of you and who you take care of back. It's about who you want to be with when you're happy and who you want to be with when you're sad. It's about who makes you feel safe and loved and like you belong somewhere forever. That's when Steve Harvey did something unprecedented. He walked over to the Johnsons' podium and spoke directly to them. Johnson family, I need to ask you something. Would it be okay with you if we made this round about something more important than points? The Johnson patriarch, a man named Robert, didn't hesitate. Steve, this little boy just taught all of us something beautiful. Whatever you want to do. Steve walked back to center stage and addressed the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone here to understand what just happened. This 8-year-old boy just gave us the most beautiful definition of family I've ever heard in my life, and I think we need to honor that. Steve turned to Jake. Jake, I want you to know something. You just taught everyone in this studio, and everyone watching at home, that love isn't about genetics. Love is about choice. Your family didn't just get you by accident. They chose you. Every single day for 4 years, they've chosen you, and you know what that makes you? Jake shook his head, his eyes wide. That makes you the most wanted little boy in the world. Because your family didn't just get stuck with you. They picked you out special, and they keep picking you every single day. But Steve wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, but then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he took off his suit jacket and walked over to Jake. This jacket has been with me for every family that stood on this stage, Steve said, draping it over Jake's small shoulders. It's seen families laugh together and cry together and love each other through everything. And I want you to have it because you just reminded all of us what family really means. Jake, swimming in Steve's oversized jacket, looked up at him with wonder. Can I really keep it? You can keep it forever, buddy. Just like your family gets to keep you forever. That's when something magical happened. Emma jumped down from the family podium and ran to her brother, wrapping him in a hug that nearly knocked him over. David and Lisa followed, and soon the entire Williams family was gathered around Jake in the center of the stage. But then the Johnsons did something unexpected. They left their podium too, and Robert Johnson knelt down next Jake. Son, he said, my family looks a lot alike, and people always assume we belong together. But you know what? After hearing you talk about real family, I realized my kids could learn something from you. You understand what love means in a way that might take some of us a lifetime to figure out. The audience was on its feet now, not because they were prompted to applaud, but because they had witnessed something authentic and beautiful and true. The cameras kept rolling, capturing not just a game show moment, but a profound statement about what family meant when it was built on choice rather than chance. Steve addressed the audience and the cameras one final time. Today we learned something more important than any survey could teach us. We learned that family isn't about who you're related to. It's about who you're willing to fight for, who you're willing to sacrifice for, who you choose to love even when it's hard. The episode aired exactly as it happened, unedited, 6 months later. It became one of the most watched Family Feud episodes in the show's history. Not because of any game show drama, but because viewers recognized something authentic about love and choice, and what it meant to build a family intentionally. More importantly, it sparked conversations about adoption, about chosen families, about the different ways that love manifests in the world. The episode was shared extensively by adoption agencies, family counselors, and organizations that worked with children in foster care. Jake Williams returned to school the following week as something of a local celebrity, but more importantly, as a child who had publicly affirmed his place in his family in a way that resolved lingering questions about where he belonged. The jacket that Steve gave him became a treasured possession, but not just for its sentimental value. It became a symbol of validation, a tangible reminder that his understanding of family had been recognized and celebrated on a national stage. Years later, when Jake was in middle school and occasionally struggled with questions about his identity and his place in his family, Lisa would remind him of that day on Family Feud when he had explained to the entire country what real family meant. "You didn't just answer a question that day," she would tell him. "You taught everyone watching that love is stronger than genetics, that choice is more powerful than chance, and that real families are the ones who choose each other every single day." Today, Jake Williams is 12 years old and thriving in 7th grade, where he serves as a peer mentor for other students who have experienced foster care or adoption. He still has Steve's jacket carefully preserved in his closet, and he still remembers every word of that conversation about what makes families strong. He and Emma are as close as any biological siblings, united not by shared DNA but by shared experiences. Inside jokes, mutual protection, and the kind of bond that comes from growing up in a family that celebrates differences rather than hiding them. David and Lisa have become advocates for adoption and foster care, speaking to prospective families about the challenges and rewards of building families through choice rather than birth. They always share Jake's story, his definition of real family, and his wisdom about what makes families strong. The Williams family has since adopted 2 more children, siblings who needed a family that understood trauma, choice, and a particular kind of strength that comes from being chosen. Jake has become a big brother who teaches other adopted children what he learned from Emma and his parents. That real family is about who takes care of you and who you take care of back. Jake's answer that day never made it onto the board, but it made it into the hearts of thousands of families who understood that love comes in many forms, that biology is just one way to build family bonds, and that sometimes the strongest families are the ones built intentionally, with choice and commitment and the daily decision to stay together when things get hard. The conversation that began with a simple question about what makes families strong has continued for years, rippling outward to adoption communities, foster care organizations, and countless families who needed to hear that their chosen bonds were just as valid, just as real, and just as powerful as any biological connection. That's what Jake Williams taught America that day. That's what his family taught him. That's what love looks like when it's working the way it's supposed to work, not automatic or assumed, but intentional and chosen, and renewed every single day by people who decide that family isn't about who you're related to, but about who you're willing to love no matter what. And in classrooms and courtrooms and living rooms across the country, where families are built through choice rather than chance, Jake's definition continues to provide comfort and validation. Real family is about who takes care of you and who you take care of back. Especially when things get hard. Especially when love requires effort. Especially when the choice to stay together is renewed every single day. The impact of Jake's words extended far beyond that single afternoon in the Family Feud studio. Within weeks of the episode airing, adoption agencies across the country reported increased inquiries from families interested in adopting older children. Foster care organizations received donations and volunteer applications from people who had been moved by Jake's story. The episode became required viewing at several adoption agencies, used as part of their preparation process for prospective adoptive parents. Social workers found that Jake's simple explanation of what made families strong helped adults understand what children in foster care needed most. Not perfect families, but committed ones. Jake's teacher noticed changes in her classroom after the episode aired. Children who had been hesitant to talk about their own family situations suddenly felt more confident sharing their stories. Jake's public declaration that families came in many forms gave other children permission to celebrate their own non-traditional family structures. One particularly meaningful letter arrived from a single mother in Ohio, who wrote that after 8 years of raising her daughter alone, she had always felt like they weren't a real family. When Jake said that real family is about who takes care of you and who you take care of back, my daughter looked at me and said, "Mom, that's us. We take care of each other." Steve Harvey kept his promise to stay in touch with the Williams family. Every year on the anniversary of Jake's adoption, Steve sent a video message, usually featuring Jake wearing the now too small suit jacket, reminding him that he was still the most wanted little boy in the world. By the time Jake turned 12, the Williams family had grown to include Maria and Luis, 7-year-old siblings who had spent 3 years in foster care. Jake played a crucial role in helping them adjust, sharing his own experiences and teaching them what he had learned about trust, permanence, and love. The first night they were here, Jake told Steve in one of their annual conversations, "Maria asked me if Mom and Dad were going to send them back when they got tired of them. I told her what you told me, that we don't get sent back because we're not here by accident. We're here because we were chosen special." The Williams family's advocacy work expanded over the years. They began hosting support groups for adoptive families, with Jake becoming a regular speaker despite his young age. His perspective as an adopted child provided insights that parents sometimes couldn't see. Sometimes adopted kids act out not because they don't love their families, but because they're testing to see if their families will still love them when they're not perfect. Jake explained to a group of adoptive parents when he was 11. The suit jacket that Steve had given Jake continued to hold special meaning. It remained carefully preserved in his closet, brought out for special occasions. When Maria and Luis first arrived, Jake showed them the jacket and explained its significance. "This is from the day I told everyone on TV what real families are like," he explained to them. "And now I want to teach you the same thing I taught them, that real families don't give up on you, even when things get hard." As Jake entered his teenage years, his understanding of family continued to evolve. He appreciated not just what his parents had done in choosing him, but what Emma had sacrificed in becoming his sister. He understood that adoption affected everyone in the family. "Emma could have been jealous when I came," Jake reflected during a family dinner when he was 13, "but instead, she made room for me and taught me how to be part of the family. That's what real siblings do." The Williams family story had become part of the adoption community's collective wisdom, shared at training sessions and conferences. Jake's definition of real family had become a touchstone for social workers and families navigating the complex emotions involved in adoption. The 8-year-old boy who had once worried that he didn't look like his family had grown into a teenager who understood that love was more powerful than genetics, choice was more meaningful than chance, and real families were defined not by who looked alike, but by who chose to stay together when things got hard. That lesson, learned in a courthouse at age 4, articulated on a game show stage at age 8, and lived out every day since, had become the foundation for everything Jake understood about love, commitment, and what it truly meant to belong somewhere forever. Today, as Jake continues to grow into the young man his family always believed he could become, he carries forward not just the memory of that transformative day on Family Feud, but the deep understanding that family is both a gift and a choice, both a blessing and a responsibility, both a safe harbor and a launching pad for love that extends beyond any single household. The ripples from that 8-year-old boy's wisdom continue to spread across communities and families everywhere, reminding countless households that the strongest bonds aren't necessarily the ones written in DNA, but the ones written in daily acts of love, unwavering commitment, and the sacred decision to choose each other again and again. Especially when things get hard, especially when love requires extraordinary courage, especially when the choice to stay together becomes the unshakable foundation for everything beautiful that follows in a life built intentionally on chosen love.